Red along the left side is our boundary with Charlotte. If you go on the right side, that orange kind of color is our boundary with Midland, and then the last is our boundary with Concord. And at this point, we have agreements with all three. I've just included the one for the Midland Harrisburg. It's the shortest and the easiest to see. We have an agreement with them that just was adopted last year, and so it will expire 10 years or July 2034. Concord we just adopted last month, and that will go through June 2035. And Charlotte, we need to up that again, Rich. That is January 1, 2026, so we need to get that one updated. So the UDO is really what you base all of your decisions on. UDO is essentially the land use law for the town. Tells you what uses you can have, where you can have them, all the dimensional regulations, how tall, how far back, and it is the basis for anything that you would hear in terms of an appeal, whether it's an appeal of an administrative interpretation or a variance. And so anyone can appeal any part of the ordinance, and anyone can ask for a variance from any part of the ordinance. And so, again, zoning is what separates the uses in two distinct districts. Residential, commercial, industrial are the broad categories. And then we have some mixed-use districts where you can have residential and non-residential. And as I said, there are a bunch of regulations which will help to guide how the development occurs: lighting, landscaping, height, parking, all of those things. And so we, as a staff, follow those in terms of reviewing development approval or development applications. Subdivision regulations or UDO regulates subdivision, which means the separation of a parcel into multiple parcels. There's a minor subdivision, which is 5 lots with no new roads, and then a major, which is 5 or more lots or a new road. So if you had 4 lots and a new road, that's considered a major subdivision. And so we manage that process, and typically you're not going to see anything related to subdivision unless someone wants to get a variance from some portion that regulates the subdivision regulations. The Harrisburg Area Land Use Plan is, again, essentially the policy, the broad statement of how the town wants to develop, and you can see that there is a 4 or 5 colors that constitute residential, and then there are probably 3 or 4 that constitute non-residential. The green would be low density, the yellow, green is very low density, the yellow is low density, and then you get into the orange, which is medium density, and then those purple and red and other colors are commercial or industrial. And so when someone comes in and they want to either develop or they want to come into the town boundaries, this is the map that the board looks at. First, it is the planning board, ultimately makes a recommendation to the town council. And so the land use plan really is, again, the broad policy statement for how the town wants to develop. It is primarily concerned with land use, but land use encompasses a lot of different things, not just what you build on the ground. And this is just a pictorial for each use, and it will give you a little synopsis of what is the character for that land use designation. And we would follow that in whether it's for new development, for subdivision, or for rezoning, which primarily is what the planning board and the council will see. So what else is there? Well, you have the planning staff, you have the town attorney, conflicts of interest, and then open meetings law. And we will go through these, and I think the pain will be minimum. So planning and zoning staff, what do? We essentially oversee the development approval process. So we review every site plan, subdivision, rezoning that comes before the town. We will make a staff recommendation. That recommendation goes to the Planning and Zoning Board. The Planning and Zoning Board then will review it and make a recommendation. It could be a recommendation to approve. It could be a recommendation to deny, or they could make no recommendation. And if that's the case, then the council can essentially move ahead. But there is a requirement under the law that the Planning and Zoning Board hear a legislative approval. So that would be a rezoning, subdivision, preliminary plats, and there's several other. So Planning Board has to weigh in whether they choose to or not, or whether they favor it or not. Ultimately, does not bind the town council, and that process is fairly straightforward. Town attorney will advise the planning and zoning board, as well as the BOA and the town council, matters of law. We had several cases last year where we actually had 3 or 4 lawyers in the room for a variety of reasons. But the one thing that you all, as a Board of Adjustment, don't typically get involved in is the approval process, but the Planning Board does have to make a statement of consistency. Is the proposal consistent with the Harrisburg Area Land Use Plan? If it is, they will say so. If it's not, they will say so. But town council is not bound by whether it is consistent or not consistent with the land use plan, because the HALOP does not have a standing that is binding. So we look to Rich, and Rich will guide us, and particularly through quasi-judicial proceeding. We want to be very careful because more often than not, there will be an appeal of a Board of Adjustment decision, not a town council decision on a legislative matter. So we have to make sure that we're following the law. Conflicts of interest, essentially you ruling in your position, and the law is pretty straightforward, but essentially saying that you shall not participate in a manner that would violate an affected person, which would be the applicant, constitutional right to an impartial decision maker. So we're talking about equal protection. So if you have a conflict which essentially would prevent you from making a decision that is not already made, or you come in with a fixed opinion, then that would be a basis for a conflict of interest, and a recusal, which essentially means you would step down from hearing that case. And if we have our alternates here, one of the alternates would take the place of that person. So it's pretty straightforward. Open meetings law, all our meetings are open. You don't recess and go in a back room and debate whether or not to approve or deny something. It's all done in public. Pretty straightforward. The hearing is conducted. There's deliberation. You take action, and that is the process. There's other business that you may transact, minutes, selection of a chair, vice chair, those sorts of things. But typically, you're going to be hearing some case, and you'll go through that whole process. Important resources: Harrisburg Area Land Use Plan, the UDO, and the Harrisburg Transportation Plan. We'll make sure you have all of this links, all these links. The other thing you should have, oh, there it is. Okay, great. So the quasi-judicial handbook is a great resource that gives you essentially the guidance for how you as a board member should process a case that comes before you. We also have introductions to zoning and development regulations, which is really a document that is would cover land development regulations, as well as touch on some quasi-judicial or Board of Adjustment matters. But the quasi-judicial handbook is just for Board of Adjustment matters. And we do have training periodically, and that's good to take advantage of, because if you are new on the board, then you need to absorb as much as you can. And so that essentially is the presentation. Did you time me on that? That was really pretty good. Any questions immediately? If you have questions, you can always ask, call, and we will be glad to answer those. But if you got anything right now, either I or Rich will be glad to answer them. If they're really hard, Rich can answer them.
Questions for Zach?
Zach, you didn't mention the rules of procedure for this.
Yes, thank you. So the board is bound by rules of procedure, and I think you should have, okay. You should have a copy of that. And so rules of procedure will govern everything from the selection process for board members, and those, everybody went through that, so you know how that works. And then the process of conducting the meeting, the chair, vice chair, motions, decision, and so that really is your operating manual, and you need to follow that. Periodically there may be a change, an amendment, but it doesn't change too often. But
it's based on state law. So that book that he was telling you about quasi-judicial decisions, a lot of that is in our rules because it has to be. So that's
yeah.
But you read the two of them together.
Yeah, they're have tos. They're not want to or might to. So you know, we've incorporated a lot of that, as we have in the UDO, and the UDO, which is undergoing an update right now, does reflect a lot of the same thing. And there's some discretion in there that we have some flexibility on, you know, certain things, but certain things are not flexible. They're required by law, and so we have to stick closely to the playbook on.
Town council, this is the toughest board to sit on in the town. I would put that out there because it's so dependent upon following the law and doing things in a certain way. And the decisions you make are not easy ones in most cases. Fortunately, we don't have that many of them, but when we do have them, those of you that have sat before, you realize that. So it's a very responsible job.
And the other thing, just to amplify that, if there's ever a question, stop and say, Mr. Town Attorney, we have a question. You can recess in the middle of a meeting. You could take a recess. You don't have to just, and you also don't need to decide a case that night. You can say, we're going to carry this to another meeting.
You can't talk about it outside the meeting.
Right.
If you do that, it all has to be in the public meeting. So you can't discuss it among yourself. outside like you might think you could. You're not allowed to do that.
And occasionally, we've had this before, visits to the site. Those are allowed. So you want to see, okay, this is a special use permit for use X. I'd like to see what the site looks like. We arrange a visit to the site, and you can go out and view it. And
That's all you can do is just view it. You can't talk about it.
Right. So you're not out there talking to the applicant and seeing how they're going to operate things. But in the course of the meeting, you each are like a judge, so you can ask questions of the applicant, and they have to answer those. They're sworn at the beginning of the meeting, and so testimony has got to be based on evidence, not hearsay. Anything else, Rich, that we should? So if Rich didn't scare you enough, we typically will give you a heads up if there's going to be a case for the next month. And at this point, we do not anticipate a case. Now, there's always possible that someone could appeal something, or there's an emergency, or something happens, but at this point, we don't know about anything. So that would be August. You would have off. You can go to the beach, the mountains. We don't restrict you in terms of where you can go, but we at this point we don't have anything for August. So at that point, I will back up, and you all can process the rest of the meeting. We do need to swear in Iswar. I don't know if we want to do that, Rich, while still in. Do we need to do it while the board's still seated?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
So.
that's good to know.
So we'll back up a bit before we go to adjournment. Mr. Chamarthy arrived, so grab that sheet.
Come on up here.
Is
I'll get it.
is Casey still here?
I'll get it.
Grab one on your phone.
Don't want to be in the
Yeah.
background?
Yeah. No, I'll move.
You got it, Carly?
Yeah, I'll take it. They just don't want to be in the background. Just insert your name here. Stand right up here.
Can we use the pen?
Yeah. You can fill that. And then just read that, and then,
I, Ishwar Sharma, do solemnly affirm that I will support and maintain the Constitution and law of the United States and the Constitution and law of North Carolina, not inconsistent therewith, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as a member of the Town of Harrisburg Board of Adjustment.
thank you.
You had a chance to back out, after you heard from Rich, but
Pipe down.
It's too late now.
Congratulations.
So I'll just say one more thing real quick. So
Just one.
Kayla is seated tonight. She's an alternate, but the reason she's seated is one of the regular members, Brandon, is not here. And so if it happens that we have a full board and both alternates are here, they would sit in the audience. They would not be seated. But if for some reason you need to replace, or, and it could be a recusal, it could be whatever it might be, then you would seat the alternate. But typically you'd be here. But we ask you to be here because it is, you learn while you're listening.
All right, before we muzzle Zach, last item on the agenda is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.